Hi, good evening. My name is Amanda Heckert, and I'm the executive editor here at Garden & Gun. And it is my pleasure to welcome y'all here tonight to our G&G Reads series. And just to be able to be here for this what is sure to be a fabulous conversation between two dynamite women, Bunny Williams and Helen Ellis. They're up here on this lovely set tonight, thanks to our partners at Serena and Lily. So we want to give a special thank you to them. Thank you. It's also my pleasure to tell y'all a little bit about the two women. Not that they need much introduction that are up here tonight, but Helen Ellis is a native of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and she lives in New York City now with her journalist husband, Lex Harris, but she is the author of 5 books, including the best-selling American Housewife and Southern Lady Code. All of her books are hilarious. And she is also a contributing editor to Garden & Gun. And I'm here to break just a little bit of news tonight. She is going to be taking over as our back page columnist as of the February-March issue. So please be on the lookout for that. We're very excited about that for Helen. Bunny Williams, of course, is a legend. A true legend of not only gracious but comfortable design and decoration, gardening, of course, and entertaining. As many of y'all probably know, Bunny is from just outside of Charlottesville, Virginia, and got her start, really made her mark at the illustrious design firm Parrish Hadley in New York City. And then after 22 years there, she struck out on her own and started her own company in 1988. And of course, as we know, became one of the most in-demand designers in the world. Since then, she's had many projects, but among them, she started Bunny Williams Home in 2008, the home furnishings collection, which I think just a couple of years ago opened a beautiful new showroom at New York's Interior Arts Building. So if you're up there, drop by. But along the way, Bunny has written a number of books chronicling her own inspiring homes and gardens. And one she shares with her husband, the antiques dealer, John Rosselli, and her many dogs. Her friend and one of our former columnists, the late Julia Reed, wrote a beautiful profile of Bunny in which Bunny shared one of my favorite bits of wisdom. And I'm paraphrasing here because I don't remember exactly, but it was something along the lines of, I'm always suspicious of people who don't like dogs in the house. So Bunny has chronicled these homes and gardens from her Connecticut estate to the Dominican Republic, and that is why we are here tonight to celebrate her latest book, Bunny Williams, Life in the Garden, a beautiful new coffee table book released earlier this year. So I'm going to hand it over to them. Please join me in welcoming Bunny and Helen.
Testing. Is this thing on? Bunny, I'm so happy to be with you tonight. And one of my favorite things that you write in the book is, if you were lucky enough to grow up in the South, hospitality is something that you learned early on. And here we are in Charleston with 200 Southern ladies, and I see 4 gentlemen. You're brave gentlemen. And we're sponsored by Garden & Gun and Serena and Lily, so we're in the heart of the South. Tell me, why is a garden the perfect place for a party?
The garden? Well, first of all, hopefully there are no bugs, but the garden to me is, it just has soul. I always say, I can decorate my house, I can put the furniture in, dust it once a week, and it's okay. A garden there isn't a day goes by that you don't have to tend it. You don't really know what it's going to do because Mother Nature comes in. And so to me, when I'm in a garden, and I don't care how big the garden is or where I am, when I see a garden that's well cared for and loved, I'm always in awe of it because I know how much hard work went into it. So when you're in a garden, you're in this romantic setting. You're in this place that, nature created, God created. And I find it just a very spiritual place to be.
It's very spill friendly.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, that's one of the things that I love about your book and the way you write about gardens. And that is that gardens are a place to make mistakes. And there's a great story you tell about a 150-year-old maple. Can you tell that story?
The one that died?
Yes.
I have another one about to die. No, but it's nature, and you all of a sudden there's this tree, and you see the leaves come off, and you think, okay, what do I do? And it's really sad to lose it. But I always say, John always says, plant a tree for the future. We can't. I lost 2 big trees this year. One actually, this incredible pine that I think was over 100 years old. And all of a sudden, one Friday night, there wasn't even a storm. Saturday morning, we woke up and the tree split. And there was about a 5-foot trunk, and this enormous tree split and fell. But the funny thing is that it fell over a path from our birdhouse village. And I looked at it. Right now, it looks looks like a dinosaur. But I decided to keep it and make it an arbor. And I planted clematis and Virginia creeper on it. So I'm going to make it into something that's a part of the garden because I couldn't bring myself to cut that tree up. It was 150 years old, and it just killed me to have to say it's going to the dump. So hopefully it'll be a feature at some point.
I think that's great. That's what I love too, is that with these accidents, with these mistakes, it brings new things, into your garden. Can you think of other mistakes, whether they're in the garden or in life, where something like that has happened, that sort of opened a new opportunity?
Well, I think, if you, depending on what your property is or where your garden is, sometimes you need more light. I mean, so losing a tree opens up a place for other things to grow. So I think you always have to look at what's happened and be positive about it and think, well, maybe this doesn't have to have shade plants. I can grow something else here.
It's always adapting. And that's another thing that I love about what you write about in the book, how you're continually educating yourself on a garden. I think that you say a garden is never done.
I knew nothing about gardens when I got started. I bought this house 40 years ago. And
what made you pick this house?
I had been looking, actually, with my ex-husband. I think maybe that's why he's my ex-husband. But anyway, I had been looking, we had been looking at houses for a long time. And I knew, and I'm not a superstitious person at all. When we turned into the driveway of this house, my palms started to perspire. Something physically happened to me. And I said, I am going to live in this house. I hadn't even gone inside. All I saw were these big trees, and I love the way it sort of sat up on a hill. Of course, it was a rooming house, and it was gray gardens, if you know what I mean. There were people sleeping in every room. I mean, it was deplorable. And I always say, it's like any affair. You never see the problems in the beginning. It's always perfect. And so I thought it was the most beautiful house I'd ever seen. And because I wanted this house because I wanted to start a garden. And I looked at it, and there was one place, if you read the book, I started in what's called the sunken garden. And it was the only flat part, and it had sun. And I thought, well, I see a garden here probably. And so I knew nothing. So I ordered 2 perennial borders from Wayside Gardens. I promise you. I knew names of flowers, but I didn't know a lot about plants. And we dug the beds and planted it. And it did okay, but it really wasn't very pretty. And then I started buying plants. And of course, I bought all the plants that were too small because the space was too big. Anyway, it's been an evolution, and it's been going to look at gardens, going to see everything I could, reading books, but mainly going to look at gardens. I mean, I think you learn a lot when you're in a physical space. I mean, think of these beautiful gardens in Charleston. I started going to England and Italy and whatever, and came back, and so this garden is evolved over.
I love that. You write about when you travel, wherever you travel, you try to work in seeing a garden. I do that with a museum. I'll go to a museum, that sort of thing. What have you brought back from certain places? What influences did you see out there and actually bring back into your gardens?
Well, first of all, I think that like anything, you have to have gardens that respond to you. It's just like dresses or clothes or you're decorating. The things that you pick or you do have to be something that respond to you. I love English gardens. I mean, they're absolutely, going to Sissinghurst was to me like going to the Holy Grail. I mean, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. So I love the abundance of garden, the plant material, Great Dixter. I mean, those gardens are amazing. What I learned about them is that you need structure. You need a plan. And that was one of the things that took me a while to get my gardens to fit together, that there's a plan. It's not just flowers and in the ground. What does it mean? So if you have the plan. But I talk about it in the book. There was one part of my garden that I really didn't like, and I went to Belgium. We were in Belgium looking at gardens, and there were these great gardens by the Verts family. The father was a genius, absolutely wonderful man. And in Belgium, it's very flat, and so they do all these beautiful hedges. So I came back, and I said, I'm going to plant this hedge, and it's curved. It's in the book, and it all of a sudden established, there's lawn in between. And I kept the lawn because it's where I like to have parties. And I had a wedding, which is in the book, my nephew's wedding. And we've done charity events in it. So I needed a space that was clean that I could put up a tent. But the hedges now are one of the most beautiful parts of the garden. But I saw that in Belgium. I saw it being inspired by going that trip.
I love that. And somewhere in the book, you talk about how you divide your gardens up into rooms.
They're rooms.
Yeah. Sort of like you would decorate a house. That's the way I thought of it. And when you're reading this book, as a writer, I think about how are you writing this book? How are you putting this book together? Because this book is like a garden to me. Can you talk about how this book came to be? Because there's different textures of paper, and there's pictures, and there's stories, and it's the
funny.
most wonderful thing.
I was telling somebody today, I write all my books in longhand on a yellow pad because I hate the computer. I don't type fast enough. If I'm typing, it goes phooey, and then it goes to something else. And, I didn't grow up with a laptop. I didn't even grow up with cell phones. So it's easier for me to write on a yellow pad. I give it to my wonderful assistant, Carolyn, who can read my scroll, and she puts it into the computer so that we can edit from that. But it's like telling stories. I do an outline, and I think, where am I going? What do I want to say? And then it's telling stories. And
did you start with the stories and then add the pictures, or did you start with the pictures and then write about those pictures?
I think we started. It's interesting. I wasn't going to do. I had no intention of doing a book, except when Annie Schlechter, who's the main photographer in of the book, came up. She came up to shoot our new bedroom for veranda, and she fell in love with the property, and she started taking pictures in a way that made me see it in a different way. I mean, it's just interesting with photography. And when I saw Annie's picture, I said, I think I want to do this book. The other thing about this book to me, and it's why I wanted this house 40 years ago. It's our home. It is where I've lived. It's where I've had Christmases. It's where I had my nephew's
Don't
wedding.
get me started on Christmas.
It's and the touching thing about this book is if you read the book, the last essay is written by my nephew, who's come there since he was a baby. And he talks about his trips, getting to the house, coming for holidays. And to me, that's why, frankly, I do what I do for decorating. I want to create homes. And this property has been my home, still is. I hope it will be my home forever. And I think that I wanted to express that in the book, as well as gardening, entertaining, which to me is so important. I always think when I grew up in Charlottesville, we lived out in the country, and people used to just drop by. They're going down the Garth Road, and they say, "Oh, I'll just stop in and say hello." Can you imagine dropping in today? People would have a heart attack. But we were always ready. I mean, there were cheese straws and peanuts, and there was always something to offer somebody. And of course, there was always a full bar, and there was usually iced tea made. So you thought nothing of it. And I love that spontaneity.
I love that. And you say in the book, the easiest way to entertain is to be prepared.
Totally.
And in addition to the beautiful pictures of the gardens, some of my favorite pictures are of the table settings. And Bunny, I have discovered, is quite a collector. There are many pictures of many pots, many birdhouses, many benches, many linen napkins. And these tablescapes are stunning. And I want you to talk a little bit about that, these incredible collections.
John, wonderful John, who is now 95. He was the best cook in the whole world. I mean, literally a natural cook. He could go in the kitchen at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and have dinner on the table for 20 people and a neat kitchen. I'm like, oh. He says, when I cook, it looks like the Board of Health has to come in and clean up. He said, I can't believe how many pots and pans you can use. Anyway, he always said to me, and I love setting a table. And I think I've always been inspired by Matisse and all the patterns. And if you look at those paintings of, the patterns and the china. So I just love to get patterned tablecloths, mix my china with it. And what's so interesting today is you can go buy fabulous china for nothing. I mean, if you go to a resale shop, people are getting rid of it. They don't want it. And I cannot go in another resale shop because I have no room for a fork. And yet you find there are 12 beautiful dinner plates for $150. And I mix it up. I mean, I love to have different things. I mix up contemporary plates, like blue and white. We have some beautiful contemporary plates. I mix it with blue and white spode. It's fun to mix it up. So for me, setting a table is like painting a picture. Pick the tablecloth, I do the china, glasses, and then do the flowers, which is really, so I could spend all afternoon doing that. So John's always like, who's coming for dinner? And I always have to make sure every weekend we have some people for dinner so I can set a table.
I love how you say setting a table is like painting a picture.
It is.
I love that. And you've said something similar about flower arranging. And I love that chapter you have on flower arranging because you say it's the easiest art to make because the flower is already perfect. It's already a painting in itself. Let's talk about flower arranging. Do you have a method to flower arranging?
We do every Friday. We do flowers for the house because we have the cutting garden, and I think the most interesting thing is if you go out and cut, if you have property, if you go out and cut woody things that have leaves on them, that becomes my form to hold the flowers. I don't use oasis and things like that because I think it makes the flower arrangement look sort of like FTD. I want my flower arrangements to be very loose and look like I just cut them from the garden. So I often use a hydrangea or something that has a woody stem. I put that in, and then you build from that. And sometimes you have the smaller things. These are cut short, and then you find airy things to go above it. And we do we do a lot of small ones, and you'll see in the book we do this huge one in the barn every weekend, almost every weekend. That's sort of a joint effort. And I go cut from the side of the road. I always have in my car clippers. When I see beautiful weeds growing, I think nothing of pulling over and cutting them and sticking them in the back of the car, because they're tall and airy and they just look wonderful in the flower arrangement.
I love that you travel around with your clippers.
Sure.
I wrote a piece for Garden & Gun a while ago about the best hostess gift, and I have a friend in New York City, and her hostess gift is some sort of tool that you carry in your glove compartment that will cut you out of a seatbelt and break the window in case you crash. So I like a lady who walks around with a sharp weapon in her bag. What I love about what you write about, again, there are certain themes that come around, and even what we've been talking about now is this sort of memory keeping. It's a memory keeping with the tablescapes, with the vintage china. It's memory keeping with the types of flowers that you keep in the garden. You've told a wonderful story about how you grew along a trellis flowers that your mother loved, and you open up in the daytime and then close up. What were they called?
Morning glories.
Morning glories. How do I not
My mother loved
remember
morning
that?
glories.
Yes, and I love that tribute. And you even say you're so sad to see them close, but you know they're going to open up the next morning. So what else do you keep in your garden, or do you keep in your home to honor memories of people in your past?
Well, I think that what I really think about is not that I'm keeping something as much as what I learned. It's thinking of, my mother saying, comb your hair, put your lipstick on, which of course I forget to do half the time. And, but it was this whole thing of entertaining, of loving to, she loved to cook. And I remember I was young and mother was in the kitchen. They had some friends coming for dinner. And I said, what are you giving them? And she said, oh, well, I'm making salmon mousse. And I said, why would you serve somebody mousse? I mean, I didn't know what a salmon mousse was. But, it was sort of, it's those things that you remember of what was your inspiration? Why do you do what you do? Yeah. And I think it's, I have some things that were my family's, not too many. I think I have a little different taste, but so it's not that
How so?
No, just whatever. I'm not clinging to it. But what I do love is my mommy always said, she would have her vases and she'd go buy, a Chinese export pitcher that was cracked because you could buy it for not a lot of money. And I do that because if I'm going to do flowers in it, I'm probably going to crack it again. So, I don't think it has to be perfect. I don't think anything has to be perfect. What is perfect? With a house full of dogs and people coming in and out with muddy boots and stuff, nothing stays perfect. So that's what happens.
That's right. I like what you said. You're honoring what you've learned.
Yes.
And one of my favorite parts of this book is your mother's Christmas attic. Can we talk about your mother's Christmas attic and how that affects your Christmas celebration? It's one of the most stunning trees I've ever seen.
My mother was very involved with her auxiliary at Ivy Church in Charlottesville, and they would make, they'd start sort of almost in the end of the summer making things for the Christmas bazaar at the church. So in the attic were these big tables, and they were making wreaths and Christmas ornaments. And we used to go up, and when I was little, she let us put some glue, things to it. But she and her friends would get together and make all of these things that would be sold in the Christmas bazaar. So I've always loved Christmas. I mean, I've just something that meant something to me. And then I started to fall in love years ago with Neapolitan creche figures. And I would go to the Metropolitan Museum, which has this incredible creche that they put up at Christmas. And I used to just stare at it because if you've ever been to see it, if you haven't been, you should go see it, because it's all the people who came to Bethlehem, and it's animals, and it's gardeners, and it's the kings. I mean, they're amazing. So I sort of fell in love with that. It's like theater to me. And I started collecting little by little. When John and I were in the when we were buying antiques, you would see one of them, and they're so beautiful. So I'd buy one or two, and they were in their original clothes. So all of a sudden, I sort of have a collection. So
how many do you think you have?
I don't know, probably 40. And they're all different. And then we have animals, and so every Christmas we put it up in the conservatory. And sometimes, I don't know, it's just one of those things that you love to do.
For me, Christmas time was the one time nature came into the house. You would get a live tree that would come into the house. And that was the only time we had live things in the house. I still have an anxiety dream that I didn't water the Christmas tree. So I love that. You talk about how you bring in the tree, you bring in the branches, you bring in so much. And I think that's lovely. And it makes me think about you writing about your gardens in winter, which we don't think about that often. And I want you to talk a little bit about how you experience your garden in winter, how you walk with John, and how you sort of take stock of what's to come.
Well, in the garden in winter, you really see the bones. I mean, you see, okay, how does it look without all the flowers blooming? But the other thing that you really see are the trees, the shape of the trees. I mean, the old apple trees that have been pruned now for 25 years with no leaves and no apples, they're like sculpture. I mean, you look at a tree with no leaves and bare, and the ancient trees just are so beautiful. So I think it's a different, you just see things, and you see as I say, you see the tree trunk, you see the structure, you see the old fence that is weathered and it doesn't have its climbing roses growing all over it. So it's sort of stripped to its essence, and I think it's wonderful. I keep thinking, okay, when's spring coming? I love this winter, but I don't want it to last too much longer. But no, the winter garden, and also when it snows, and it snows on top of the evergreen hedges and the patterns that it makes, is absolutely beautiful.
And I feel like you're more often on your own or just with John in the wintertime. Am I right about that? Or do you have parties in the wintertime?
Well, we don't entertain big parties as much as we used to, but we always have people for dinner.
Yeah.
I mean, we love to have people, and it's just something we love to do. So even in the winter, it's actually cozier in the winter because we're in the older part of the house. We have fireplaces, and it's just in the summer, we're outside, we're in the conservatory, we're more outside. I always say the nice thing about seasons is your house, you live in different parts of your house.
Yeah.
In the summer, you're on the screen porch, you're outside, and in the winter, you remember, oh, I have that nice living room with a fireplace. Maybe I'll go sit in there and read a book or listen to music. So it makes you...
There are beautiful pictures inside the house looking out,
Yeah.
which I particularly love. And I'm thinking about these pictures, and I'm thinking about you being outside gardening, and I'm looking at your beautiful hands. And I want to know, as all these ladies want to know, how do you keep your hands so beautiful out in the garden?
You scrub them. And
scrub them.
I have hand cream everywhere in my house. Every sink, there's like 5 kinds of hand cream. So you have to, you really have to have scrub brushes.
Yeah.
And I come in, and I can't wear gloves. I just, I can't feel the dirt.
Yeah.
So my nails sometimes look better than others, but I clean them with a brush, and then I just rub them with lots of hand cream.
There's a great story about how when you were younger, you'd love to get your hands dirty, how you love to dig in the soil. What's the last time you got your hands dirty?
Last weekend.
What did you do?
No. I'm just saying you're
Yeah.
in the garden, you're cutting, there's always something. And I love potting things up. We have a lot of containers. So one of my favorite things on the weekends is to go repot something. It needs a bigger pot. So there's a big trough of potting soil. So your hands do get dirty.
I love you're talking about pots. And I especially love it because I live in New York City. It's not conducive for a garden. But you talk about when you live in the city and you say, if you were ever to have to give up your gardens, you would be happy having pots.
Yes.
And that is one thing I did in the pandemic is I became a little obsessed with Etsy pots. Anyway, talk about
Container gardening is, I mean, it's
a container garden.
Just to have, a really pretty box, and even whether it's grasses or whatever you want to grow, but they just need water and some fertilizer. But you can have, by the side of your house, you can have 6 or 7 pots with different plants, or, you should think of the color palette you want, and you can have a little garden just in containers.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the season, throw it out and put the pot away. You need some place to store the pots. For us, we can't have terracotta out in the winter, so all the terracotta pots have to come inside.
It's kind of a good thing to use, your old or found silver, what do you call it, bowls in the lot. I was telling Bunny earlier that my friend in Florida, who I write about, who happens to be here today, told me once, in one of the greatest acts of rebellion, I took my mother's punch bowl to the Salvation Army. And of course, Bunny says, well, you could put some bulbs in that. I thought that was a great idea.
We're always looking, I mean, it's like, I do have some of my mother's silver, and I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Because who serves vegetables in a little silver dish anymore? So I'm always trying to think of something fun for it. Sometimes I fill them up with M&Ms and put them out. I don't, because they have no value. Nobody wants this stuff anymore. But big bowls you can use.
Can we talk about mice in the garden? Rabbits in the garden? Which would you rather have?
I have them all. We have two. We have 2 cats. There's a cat in the book, Snowy, who unfortunately one day just decided to go live someplace else. So we now have 2 new cats. They live in the greenhouse, and they keep down the voles and the mice who were eating.
What is a vole?
It's a little thing that goes underground.
I've been away too long.
Yeah, and they eat all the roots. I mean, voles will eat all the roots of your plants before you even see them. So, but the cats are, and it's. I have 2 people in my life, my housekeeper, who, would save an ant. I mean, nothing should be. So she's a little upset when, Emma, who's the killer, comes out with a chipmunk in her mouth. And I'm like, well, at least the chipmunk's not eating the plants and the vegetables. But, and the mice will destroy everything. The vegetable garden has a wire that goes down in the soil about over a foot to keep the rabbits out. And you really, and we have deer. We have a huge deer problem. So I have a 10-foot high deer fence around 3 sides of the property. And then across the front, there are these wire things. It looks like Alcatraz, but I've actually finally gotten the deer to not go through the property because they'll destroy everything.
Yeah, what other problems can you find in a vegetable garden? It's a little bit on the vegetable garden. I kind of want you to talk about your greenhouse and your barn and how you painted them to sort of go with the scenery.
Yes, when John decided to take what was the barn on the property and make it a house. If you've read the other books, it's in there. And so we made it a room that we entertain in, and the conservatory's there. And I had to build another barn. And I knew I just didn't want these. I wanted to look separate from the white house. So I painted them this wonderful green color. It was actually a Cabot stain. They don't even make it anymore. So when I had to redo it, I couldn't find it. So I had to take a board off the house down to a paint mixer. And I said, please match this color. But it's a soft gray green. And so all the the studio, the barn are all painted the same color, and then helps to have them disappear in the landscape. I'd rather look at the garden than another building.
I agree. And tell me about life in the city, because you live in New York City, and life in the country. Which do you prefer these days?
Well, I love to be in the country. This summer I would be in the country a week, and then back in New York for like 3 or 4 days. I'm getting to the point in my life where I realize, you know what, I can slow down with work. I have young people in my office, and it's their future. And as you were saying, I want to go to a theater on Wednesday matinee. I never had a chance to do that. I don't even go out to lunch in New York. I was working. So it's time to, to do the things that you want to do. I think life goes by. I don't know, the last year I've had 2 friends that have been very ill, and I thought, this is not a dress rehearsal, and you should. For me, this time of year, I could just be in the country every day. It is so beautiful, and the winter is fun to come into the city and go to the Met and go to the theater and do the things. So I'm really fortunate to have the choice.
I think about The Secret Garden. Do you remember the book, The Secret Garden?
Yes.
And I think there's something, your nephew writes at the end of the book, the word he uses over and over is, going to your house was magical. That was the word, magical. And I think that's something as a reader you'll experience when you read this book, when you see the photos, you really do sort of fall into it and fall in love with your gardens and fall in love with you. Is there anything, before we take questions from the audience, that you want to leave this group with?
I think one of the most important things is it's funny, I just spent a week in Italy with my family, and I don't have children. I have a niece and a nephew. I have great nieces, and now a adorable great nephew who's 20 months old who lives across the street. And what I think is so important is that you bring your children, your grandchildren into your home, because that's memories they're going to have for the rest of their life. And it's the memories I have. And it's why I love my garden. It's why I love my house, because it's the memories I have of the fun times I had at home with my parents, with their friends. And I think there's, it's funny, I love to, when the kids come to Falls Village, I always make a game. We always do something. And I didn't have pictures in the book, but I should have done it. Is one fall they came, and I said, okay, we're all going to make masks. And so I didn't have the right equipment, but we cut paper bags out, and I said, we're going to go into the woods and into the garden, and we're going to collect flora and fauna, and we're going to come back with a glue gun, and we're all going to make masks. Well, everybody took this on, even my older brother. His mask, and he's not that creative, his mask was the best. And he had kale for ears. I mean, it was so much fun. And we did it all afternoon. We laughed and laughed and laughed. And it's things like that I think you should bring generations together, and I think you should have fun, and it shouldn't be so stiff, and get your grandchild to help you set the table. I mean, it's like I say to the girls now, okay, you can help me set the table. They probably don't do it at home because their parents are too busy. So I just think it's things like that I hope that they will have those memories and enjoy.
I know that we certainly enjoy this. And I think it's time we're going to take some questions from the audience. If you have a question, Merritt will come to you. So raise your hand.
You can ask me anything, I promise.
There's one right there. Here she comes, Phil Donahue.
Bonnie, thank you very much. I'm an architect, and starting with a blank canvas is always the hardest thing to ever do. Have you ever started with a blank canvas, and what do you do to break that, right? Because constraints are like, I'm a problem solver, right? I relate to that. But what do you do to really
That's a great question.
If you're starting a garden and you have a blank canvas, you should start inside. For instance, where do you go out of the house? How are you going to move from the inside out? Depending, even the front. How do you enter the house? Where do you park your car? So you often start inside. If you have a back area and you go out a back door, maybe that's where you want a terrace, someplace to sit. And then maybe from that's a place that you could have a garden. And I think you have to think about in a garden where your light source is and how you're going to use it. Because again, it is rooms. It is a place you want to be. And I think a lot of people see an open yard and they go just put a flower bed in the middle of it with no rhyme or reason. I've done that. And you're like, okay, but this doesn't make any sense. So I always think it's best to almost start inside the house and figure out how you're going to live and what you want to look at from inside the house.
I love that. I love that idea because you're inside so much and you're looking out. I think that's a great answer. Another question.
Everybody's very shy. I didn't think.
There's one right there.
There's one.
Here she comes. Here she comes. Here she comes. Wait.
I'll repeat the question for you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, and it builds our lives around. And we're in the fortunate position of having no time constraints, but we still don't have the time to
How do you make the time?
get to the flowers or, I forget the dessert, right? I mean, you make it seem so effortless and you're doing
It's not, I think that for me, in the summer on Fridays, I like to do flowers because I like to do them and I like to see them in my house. I believe when you bring even a plant into a house, the house comes alive. I know that when we're gone from the apartment in New York, for 2 weeks, and there's no flowers or plants, I go to the Korean market on the corner and get something to put in the house because then I begin to feel like the house is coming alive. And so on Fridays, I love to do the flowers. As I say, we usually entertain. I think I have a lot of energy. I'm also learned to be disciplined because I've had a career and I had to get things done. So I make a list and this is what we're going to do. And sometimes I don't want to do anything. I'm like, I just want to curl up and work on my jigsaw puzzle and read a book. So you allow yourself time to do that. But you should be doing these things because you love to do them, not because they're a strain for you. I don't really love to cook. I'm cooking more now that John doesn't cook. And, but I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to figure out other ways to do it, that I don't have to cook the whole thing. You can get great prepared foods. I go to Trader Joe's, but you serve it on a pretty platter. They don't know where it came from.
It's homemade if you made it come to the table.
And I'm not going to tell them.
All right.
Bunny, when I'm a guest, I love to bring a plant as a Circe, as a gift. So my question to you is, what do you think is the best plant to bring as a Circe or a gift to my host?
Well, that's interesting because you have to know what they're willing to take care of. And what their light sources are. So if you take something that requires, like I love standards, well, they die in my apartment in New York because I don't really have enough light and it's an enclosed thing. So I think you have to think of, are you taking it to somebody that has an outdoor space or are you taking it to somebody to put into their house? And no plant lives forever inside. And if it's a low light situation, ferns are beautiful. Anything blooming is going to, there's some orchids that are wonderful, but they're not going to bloom forever. But there's some that'll last, a couple of months. So they can live in almost any situation.
I like a snake plant in a pretty bowl.
Yeah.
Bunny, it's a pleasure spending time with you this evening. My question is for you. What time in your life inspired you to go into design and make this miraculous decision to inspire so many around you?
It's funny. I often think about this because I really knew pretty early on that I wanted to be. I didn't know what an interior designer really was because people didn't have them a lot in Virginia. My mother loved her house. I used to go to the curtain lady with her, and she'd be making valances and stuff, and it was just sort of what you did. And they were always, we lived out in this country road, and my mother, my godmother, her best friends, they were always fooling with their houses, always talking about it. And they'd go over to each other and push the furniture around and do all this stuff. And it was fun to me. And then I was about, I think I was about 14 or 15. And my parents took me, we went to see the opening of the Greenbrier Hotel. And Dorothy Draper had just done it, and it had this big opening, and some friends of my parents had, I think, invested in it. So we went there as guests really before anybody was staying there. And I walked into this place, and I've never seen anything like it. Emerald green walls, palm trees. It was just like magic, and for a 14-year-old. And they were talking about Dorothy Draper and an interior designer, and I'm like, wouldn't this be fun to do? And so when it was time to go to college, my parents wanted me to obviously go to a liberal arts college in Virginia, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. I want to do something else. And they didn't want me to go to Parsons because Parsons in New York City had no campus, and this was a long time ago. And so I found a junior college in Boston that had an interior design program. And I went there, and sort of the rest is history. I was there for 2 years. I came to New York. I started to work in a top antique shop, and then I went to Parish Hadley, and I always say I went to the University of Parish Hadley, and which was extraordinary. I mean, I was 22 years old, and just seeing the houses, seeing the life of my second day I think my fourth day at Parish Hadley, they asked me to deliver some samples to an apartment on Fifth Avenue. And I'm telling you, I'm 20, maybe 23 years old. So I go over, ring the doorbell. A butler opens the door. And behind the butler was a painting. And it was the Picasso of the boy and the white horse, which I'd studied art history. So I was like, that's a Picasso, and I bet you that's not the poster. And I was so shocked to see this picture. I'd studied in art history in this apartment, and I went in, and it was the Paley's apartment, and of course there were Gauguins on the wall and Van Gogh, and I was like this. I felt like such a bumpkin. I was like, I can't believe this. But you're just exposed to things, and so this life brought me this wonderful exposure, and it was just exciting, and it's been exciting for a long time, and I've loved it.
We're going to do one more question. Oh, here, okay. This lady.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, I promise.
So it's hard to follow up to that inspirational, like her question was amazing, and now I feel really deficient. So I really want to reevaluate my question. But my first initial question was, you don't talk about pests at all. So I picture you going into your garden.
You're saying P-E-S-T or P-E-T? Pests?
P-E-S-T.
Pests.
Okay.
Pests.
Like wasp and all the
Sure.
things that are in the garden. And so I picture you in a lovely photo shoot and there's no pests. But for us backyard hobbyists that want to garden,
We have pests.
I want to know your secrets because I always get stung and bit, and I'm like, what? Is that just?
So the question is,
one thing I do when we have in Connecticut, we have some bad. You have it worse here because of the humidity. much worse. We have it when there's a high humidity in Connecticut, there are more bugs and stuff. And I do go out in the morning and I put on it's a natural repellent. So they're flying around me, but they're not biting me. And they're wasps, but I mean.
Okay. Well, then, since you answered that real simply, may I ask my new question after the last question because of your inspiration?
Right.
So you lived in a time when you could walk into the apartment of the Paleys. Like, what advice? And I'm not the young person asking this, but what advice would you give for a young person who aspires to make a mark, or just share their passion for gardening? And those opportunities no longer exist because there's bodyguards and there's security.
Well, but I think
she was invited.
No. No. I was working. But what I would say, and the thing that I think, whether it's gardening or interior design, today my generation, some of you are my generation, we worked before we thought we could ever do something. Every day I went to work, I realized what I didn't know. I was in awe I'm like, how could I ever do this? Today, we have Instagram. We have people who think, oh, I can do this. And frankly, their work looks like it because it's just copies of every old thing. And you kind of go, oh, I've seen and done that. So I think, and I would say for gardening, if you want to be a great gardener, go intern, go work in a garden. And I can tell you, I have an intern this summer. Everybody who has a garden, and they're if you're really serious about it, they're incredible programs at Great Dixter in a lot of gardens, even in this country, where you go, you don't get paid a lot, but you're going to learn something. And I feel like there's just too much of, oh, I looked at a book, I'm on Instagram, I know it. And I know when I went to work, all I could tell you was I was so in awe and thinking of what I didn't know that I had to learn.
That's good. I think a perfect way to end this is to quote you to you. And you're right, as much time as we work in our gardens, as much time as we spend seeing what's wrong with them, we need to find at least as much time, if not more, to enjoy them. So thank you very much, Bunny, for coming, and thank you for coming.